They called me the family maid. Until the billionaire CEO they all worshipped stood up in front of everyone and called me the woman who closed a $4 million deal. It was Christmas Eve, and I stood in my parents' kitchen, arranging sprigs of rosemary around a perfectly roasted turkey that smelled like something out of a holiday magazine. My hands were shaking, though not from the heat, from nerves. The silver serving tray reflected my face back at me. Flushed. Anxious. Trying too hard. From the dining room, I could hear my mother's voice floating through, sweet as honey, and just as fake. "This is our Melissa," she said proudly. "The family's pride and joy. She's in public relations for Bloomfield Industries now. Senior position, you know. Only 29, and already making waves in corporate America." Her words rolled off her tongue like she was reading a script she'd practiced in front of the mirror. I heard polite murmurs of approval. Someone said, "How impressive." And another voice, Senator Williams, laughed approvingly. Another Christmas Eve surrounded by Connecticut's elite. And I was still in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, making sure dinner didn't burn. Then, as always, someone asked, "And your other daughter?" A short silence, just long enough to sting before my mother replied lightly, "Oh, Christine's around somewhere. She's quite handy in the kitchen." That one line hit me harder than I expected. 15 years of building Aurora Events, my luxury event company. From nothing, and to her, I was still the helpful daughter who cooks. The turkey platter suddenly felt heavy in my hands. But I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and pushed through the swinging door into the dining room. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me, well, toward the turkey, really. "Here she is now," my mother said with that tight, performative smile. I set the turkey down at the center of the table. Waterford crystal. Wedgwood china. Sterling silver flatware. Everything gleaming under the chandelier. My mother laughed softly. "At least Christine is useful for something." That one hurt. I felt my cheeks burn as Senator Williams's wife offered a sympathetic smile. The kind that says, "Bless your heart. I'm 33 years old," I thought. "I've coordinated presidential fundraisers, celebrity weddings, multi-million-dollar launches. And yet, here I am serving turkey like hired help." "The cranberry sauce is Grandma's recipe," I said quietly, just to fill the silence. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Christine always did have a knack for following instructions. I managed to smile, but inside, I could feel something starting to crack. I slipped back into the kitchen and leaned against the marble counter. The scent of rosemary and roasted potatoes suddenly cloying. After 15 years, I was still the help. I thought about the first Christmas dinner I ever cooked for the family. I was 18. Newly accepted into culinary school, not Yale, not Harvard, so already a disappointment. While Melissa unwrapped diamond earrings and cashmere sweaters, I hovered in the kitchen, terrified that my roast might be too dry. But now, I was a CEO. Aurora Events had just landed the Horizon Resorts contract, a $2.5 million deal that would put us on the national map. My business partner, Elizabeth, had hugged me when we signed it. "You're a strategic genius, Christine," she said. "They never saw you coming." That memory made me smile right before the kitchen door swung open again. My mother stood there, silver hair perfectly coiffed, her crimson dress so precise it looked stitched onto her. "The senator is waiting for dessert," she said, checking her pearl-faced watch. "What's taking so long?" I looked at the lineup of pies and trifles I'd prepared before dawn. Something inside me shifted, small, quiet, but final. "I need a moment," I said, pulling off my apron. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic, Christine, this is what you're good at." "Well, 2 to this. And to that." There. Behind her, my father appeared. His tall frame looked smaller these days. "Is there a problem?" he asked, voice low. "Christine is having one of her moments." My mother sighed. I met his eyes. "I'm not having a moment. I'm recognizing a pattern." Outside, snowflakes drifted down over the manicured Connecticut lawn. The same lawn paid for by the company my father once owned, the one he sold, without ever including me in the succession plan, despite my business degree. "The Hendersons and the Williamsons are waiting," my mother said impatiently. "Do you have any idea how important tonight is for your sister's connections?" "Of course. Melissa's connections. Melissa's reputation. Always Melissa. I'll bring them out," I said quietly. My mother nodded, satisfied. My father lingered a second longer, opened his mouth, then shut it again and followed her. In the dining room, I smiled and served each guest personally. I'd perfected that professional, gracious smile, the same one I used when billionaires talked down to me at fundraisers. Melissa sat at the far end of the table, her blonde hair glowing under the chandelier. She was laughing about some PR triumph, her audience hanging on every word. My phone buzzed in my pocket just as I set down the last slice of chocolate truffle tart. I glanced at it discreetly. A text from Elizabeth. Emergency at the office. Horizon contract issue. Need you as soon as possible. There was no emergency. It was our code. Her way of rescuing me when the family dinners became unbearable. I looked around the table at the polished faces, the polite smiles, the suffocating hierarchy of who mattered and who didn't. I have to go, I said, setting down my napkin. My mother's smile tightened. On Christmas Eve? Surely it can wait. It's the Horizon contract, I said. For the first time all night, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Christine runs some sort of catering business, she told the senator, her voice dripping with condescension. Event planning, I corrected, keeping my voice even. We're handling Horizon's national brand relaunch. The senator raised his eyebrows. The Horizon deal? That's a major contract. My mother froze mid-smile. Melissa's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. I really must go, I said, gathering my coat. Outside, Elizabeth's car waited in the driveway, headlights cutting through the snow. She looked at me through the window, concern written all over her face. Same as last year? She asked as I slid in. Worse, I said. They know exactly what I do. They just choose not to see it. This is not like the seconds. As we drove away, I watched the warm lights of the house fade into the distance and something inside me hardened. This is the last holiday I'll ever spend as their servant, I said quietly. Elizabeth nodded. Good. You've earned the right to stop asking for permission. We left Connecticut behind and for the first time that night, I could breathe. 3 days later, Elizabeth convinced me to swing by the Willowbrook Country Club to pick up a forgotten business portfolio I'd left in my father's study. They'll be in a meeting, she'd said. In and out. No confrontation. He was no don't watch. I walked through the polished marble hallways, the scent of lemon polish and old money in the air. Then I heard it, my mother's voice. Christine has no idea we know about the Horizon deal. I froze. I crept closer to the small reading room, peering through the half-open door. Melissa was sitting there with our parents, flipping through papers. The Williamsons are on the Horizon board, she said. Their daughter works in legal. She confirmed it's worth over $2 million. My father cleared his throat. Keep your voice down, Melissa. No one's here, Dad. Besides, who cares about Christine's little catering business? Event planning. My mother corrected her. Which is why this Horizon situation is becoming problematic. The Williamsons mentioned Christine by name at the Christmas party. Before we could redirect the conversation, my breath caught in my throat. Melissa smirked. I've been calling her vendors for months, dropping hints about financial instability. Most of them believed me. My vision tunneled. Is that wise? My father asked softly. Richard, please, my mother said coldly. Christine still craves our approval too much to see what's in front of her face. She paused. She's spent 15 years thinking we just don't understand her business. The girl makes desserts for senators while serving them herself. When Bealton extends, the truth slammed into me. They knew. They'd always known. The condescension, the dismissive jokes, none of it was ignorance. It was strategy. They weren't proud of me. They were afraid of me, because I'd built something they couldn't control. I slipped away before they could see me, my heart hammering. Every memory, every lost contract, every sudden client withdrawal started rearranging itself in my mind like puzzle pieces snapping into place. The bad luck wasn't bad luck at all. It was sabotage. 15 years of it. And they were about to go after Horizon next. I texted Elizabeth. Meet me at the office. Emergency. 20 minutes. There's out. Is the dutiful Maid is safe? When I walked into the Aurora Events conference room, the Manhattan skyline was glowing through the glass walls. Elizabeth was already there, laptop open, worry written across her face. They know everything, I said flatly. Melissa's been sabotaging us for years. With Mom and Dad's help, Elizabeth didn't even look surprised. I've been documenting the pattern for months, she admitted. Clients who suddenly backed out after your family gatherings. Vendors who got anonymous calls. I didn't want to say anything until you were ready to believe it. Our CFO, James, entered then older, composed, carrying spreadsheets like armor. I ran the numbers, he said, laying down the reports. Client cancellations, vendor disruptions. The pattern is statistically significant. I stared at the graphs. Red spikes after every family event. Why? I whispered. Why would they do this? Elizabeth exchanged a look with James. Your mother needs Melissa to be the successful daughter, she said softly. And your father's investments haven't been doing well. The country club lifestyle is expensive. I laughed not out of humor, but disbelief. That's not an excuse. No, James agreed. But it's a motive. I walked to the window, looking out at the glittering city I'd built my own life in without them. Document everything, I said finally. Every canceled contract. Every fake complaint, every lie. We're not just defending a deal anymore. We're defending Aurora. Elizabeth nodded. Then let's make sure they never touch it again. And in that moment, standing in that glass-walled room above Manhattan, I stopped being the daughter who wanted their approval. I became the CEO who would never again ask for it. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen of Aurora Events, staring down at a stack of inspection reports. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear this time, but from fury. Elizabeth hovered nearby, her tablet balanced in one hand. "You've been reading that same page for 10 minutes, she said softly. I looked up, my voice tight. Because the name on this report might as well be written in neon lights. Elizabeth stepped closer. Who? I swallowed hard. Melissa. The paper crinkled in my grip. She's the one who called the health inspector before the Anderson wedding, pretending to be a concerned family member. Elizabeth's eyebrows shot up. You're sure? Positive. The report says the caller identified herself as a relative of the owner. There's only one person who'd do that and still sleep at night. Elizabeth exhaled slowly and pulled open a drawer, retrieving a folder so thick, it looked like a legal case. Christine, I've been keeping track for months. And the Grace's 17 with the Refley. And the Divin Biden after the safe founds. She spread the papers across the stainless steel prep table. Inspection dates, family dinner dates, vendor complaints, all color-coded and horrifyingly consistent. I stared at the pattern, my pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't paranoia, it was proof. You recorded her? I asked, noticing a transcript. Last month. At the vendor showcase. She was asking Martinelli's linens about our order volume, pretending she worked with us. God. I pressed my palm against the cool steel, trying to steady myself. 15 years of building this company. Brick by brick, deal by deal, while my own sister was digging at the foundation. Elizabeth looked at me carefully. What are you going to do? Thank you, Maid Jonas for. And the Nally. 2000, I took a breath. The Horizon contract signing is next week. And they'll try to stop it. She said quietly. I nodded. Then it's time I stop pretending I don't know what they're doing. The next day, I showed up at Bellini's, a polished Italian restaurant downtown, 20 minutes early. The maitre d' recognized me instantly. Aurora Events had managed his daughter's wedding last spring. Your usual table, Miss Hale. The one with the garden view? I shook my head. Not today. I'd like something more central. By the windows. He raised an eyebrow but nodded. Of course. That was no savor me with breader. What it safe in a ducey. With no savin main gen. If you're going to expose your family's betrayal, I thought, might as well make it a public performance. I set the documents beside my glass of water. Inspection reports, complaint logs, phone transcripts arranged neatly like evidence in a courtroom. At 12:15, right on cue, Melissa swept through the door. Cream-colored suit, pearl earrings, blonde hair pulled into a glossy bun that screamed PR perfection. She leaned in, air kissing my cheek before taking a seat. You look tired, Christine. Those big events must be exhausting. They are, I said evenly. Especially when someone calls health inspectors on you the day before. Her fingers froze halfway through, unfolding her napkin. Just a flicker of fear in her eyes, then the mask returned. What are you talking about? I slid the report across the table toward her. This. The inspector mentioned who called. It was you. For a second, neither of us moved. The restaurant buzzed around us, clinking glasses, murmured conversations. But at our table, the air turned electric. You're being ridiculous, she said finally, pushing the report back without even glancing at it. Am I? I pulled out another document. Here's a list of anonymous complaints filed within 48 hours of every family gathering where I mentioned upcoming clients. Her cheeks flushed. I don't have time for this. Make time. He watching the CV is like too present. And of the CV is like too present. My voice stayed calm, controlled, because I also have recordings of you pretending to represent Aurora Events while contacting our vendors. Melissa's eyes darted around, checking who might be within earshot. Then she smiled tightly. Mother's here. I looked up, and there she was. Evelyn Hale. Tailored burgundy dress, diamond earrings, posture that could cut glass. What's all this? She asked, sliding into the seat beside Melissa. Evidence, I said simply. Of systematic sabotage against my company. Her eyes narrowed. That's a serious accusation, Christine. Backed by serious proof. I turned the inspection report so she could read it. Your daughter called the inspector, pretending to worry about food safety standards. Evelyn's tone dropped into that syrupy condescension she'd mastered over the years. We were concerned about your standards, dear. After hearing about that unfortunate food poisoning incident at the Misner's. There was no food poisoning incident. I cut her off. That was a rumor. Started by someone very close to this table. Melissa started to speak, but I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. We've never had a single case of food poisoning. Ever. A waiter approached. My mother waved him away without looking. You've always been dramatic, Christine. she said softly. We're simply looking out for the family reputation. You weren't concerned, I said. You were undermining me. Again. Melissa shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable. A couple at the next table had stopped pretending not to listen. For the first time, I saw my sister panic because this time, I controlled the narrative. I was protecting our name. She hissed. Your little catering business reflects on all of us. Event planning, I corrected. And my business reflects excellence, which you've been too busy sabotaging to notice. My mother reached out, resting a manicured hand on Melissa's arm. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. The day-to-day. In matter of that. In the cover of the batters. The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't take it back. We've had 33 years of privacy. Now we're doing this in public. A ripple of murmurs spread across the restaurant. For once, they couldn't twist the truth behind closed doors. Melissa's facade cracked. Fine. I called the inspector, she snapped. I was concerned after what I heard from the Hendersons. The same Hendersons who just hired your PR firm? I asked. The same ones who canceled their contract with Aurora a week later? My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. What do you want, Christine? She asked finally. I want you to stop interfering with my business. Both of you. No more calls to vendors. No more rumors to clients. No more lies. Melissa's jaw tightened. And if we don't? I gathered the documents into a neat stack. Then the next conversation will happen with lawyers present and include the district attorney's office. I stood up, placed enough cash on the table to cover all 3 lunches, and met my mother's eyes. I've worked too hard to let anyone, even family, destroy what I've built. Outside, Elizabeth was waiting in the company car, the logo of Aurora Events glinting on the door. She smiled as I approached. Did you tell them? Everything. Which you would never. In not father intimity. Through the window, I could still see my mother and sister sitting there, their heads bent together in frantic conversation. They knew I knew. My phone buzzed. James, our CFO. Contract review meeting with Horizon just wrapped, he said. Everything's clean. Not a single concern about our standards. Elizabeth exhaled. They failed then. Not yet, I said, glancing back at the restaurant. But they will. Just then, the restaurant owner, Anthony, hurried out into the snow. Miss Hale, he called. The Chamber of Commerce is hosting their gala next month. Would Aurora be available? I smiled, fully aware that my mother and sister could see the whole exchange through the window. We'd be honored, I said. As we drove away, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. For the first time, my family's manipulation wasn't a secret shame. It was a documented fact, and they'd never again get to define me by their silence. The next week, I was back in Aurora's Manhattan office, standing by the window as rain streaked down the glass. Elizabeth and James were spread out across the conference table, papers, laptops, color-coded timelines everywhere. They'll go after the Horizon contract next, I said. It's too big not to. Elizabeth nodded, sliding a folder toward me. I've mapped out 15 years of family interference, every coincidence matched to your business timeline. The red flags were everywhere. Client withdrawals, vendor complaints, health inspectors always right after holidays, birthdays, country club events. James leaned over the chart, his gray hair catching the light. Every major setback ties to a family gathering or one of Melissa's PR functions. It's a pattern of deliberate sabotage. Every major setback ties. I settled into the head chair, feeling the weight of leadership but also the power of it. No longer the daughter serving dinner. Now, the CEO, defending her company. What vulnerabilities can they exploit? I asked. Elizabeth handed me a spreadsheet. Vendor dependencies, PR exposure, and external financing. We're stable, but these are pressure points. If they can create doubt about our capacity, James nodded, then they'll attack our credibility. I've already prepped full financial transparency docs, 5 years of audits, compliance reports, and tax filings. I exhaled slowly. Good. If they want a fight, they'll get one, but on our terms. Outside, thunder rolled through the city, like punctuation. I need eyes at the country club, I said. Mom never misses her Wednesday luncheons. That's where they'll plot next. Marcus has a cousin on the staff, Elizabeth said. He's been reporting back. Evelyn's been asking questions about Horizon's VP of marketing. I scribbled a note in my planner. And James, reach out to First National. If they plan to hit us through our financials, I want advance notice. Already handled, he said, sliding another folder across the table. And I've set up contingency funding in case they try to pressure our lenders. It was methodical, strategic. And, for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was anticipating. We're not preparing for another confrontation, I said. We're preparing for war. That night, Elizabeth's phone buzzed. She frowned as she read the message. Christine. They just hired Victoria Foster as a family PR consultant. My blood ran cold. Victoria Foster, the same PR executive who'd sued Aurora 3 years ago, after we refused to hire her daughter. She'd lost the case but had spent years whispering poison through industry circles. They know exactly where to hit us, I murmured. James's jaw tightened. Foster still has friends at Vanity Fair and the Journal. She could spread damage fast. Elizabeth nodded grimly. This isn't just about the contract anymore. They're going after your reputation. I looked out at the city lights, reflections of power and resilience gleaming in the rain-streaked glass. Then let's make sure we're ready, I said. Prepare media response templates for every possible accusation. We'll counter them before they even finish speaking. My reflection in the window looked different now, sharper, calmer, unshakable. The daughter was gone. Only the CEO remained. They want a war? I said quietly. Let's make sure we win it. That evening, the conference room at Aurora Events looked more like a war room than a workspace. Stacks of documents covered every inch of the mahogany table, contracts, spreadsheets, and glowing laptop screens casting blue light across tired faces. James leaned forward, glasses low on his nose, tapping a figure into a calculator. These numbers, he said, tell a story of success and stability. 15 years of consistent growth. They can't argue with that. Elizabeth nodded, flipping through a binder of testimonials. Every major client for the past 3 years, she said. The Vanderbilts, the Sandersons, the Kellers, all glowing feedback. Especially the Vanderbilts. They practically wrote us a love letter after last summer's charity gala. I glanced down the table at my 2 allies, the people who had become my real family. Good, I said. Let's tighten the contract language with Horizon. I want ironclad protections. If my parents try anything, I want it to backfire legally. Elizabeth typed rapidly. Already drafting clauses for third-party interference. We'd been at it for hours, not driven by panic, but by clarity. For 15 years, I'd been defending myself against invisible attacks. Now, I knew exactly who the enemy was. This isn't about proving I'm right anymore, I said quietly. It's about protecting what we built. James looked up from his laptop. Then let's make sure no one can ever take it away. Later that night, Elizabeth walked into my office holding her tablet. Her expression was careful, too careful. Christine, she said slowly. I just got off a call with Danielle at Horizon. I froze. What happened? It is a raid, mind Esther. Your mother called their corporate office yesterday. The silence that followed was deafening. What did she want? Danielle didn't say much, Elizabeth replied. But she found it odd that Mrs. Hale was asking about project management assignments. Specifically, who's handling the contract execution. My stomach turned. Did she mention you by name? Elizabeth nodded once. Yes. The air in the room thickened. One thing to come after me, but going after my team? That crossed a line I didn't even know existed. James leaned back, the light from his laptop flickering over his face. That's escalation, he said simply. I stared out the window, the city glimmering below like 1,000 little battlefields. They're researching everyone close to me, I said. Not just Aurora, the people who make it strong. If they can't break me directly, they'll try to shake the people I trust. Elizabeth's voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed worry. I can handle myself. I know you can, I said softly, but document everything. No solo meetings with anyone connected to my family. No favors, no lunches, no phone calls. Forward anything suspicious to me. She studied my face for a moment and then nodded. You think they'll really go that far? I don't think, I said. I know. Headmans, it's what not Taymans. Hours passed. Coffee cups multiplied. By midnight, we had rebuilt our entire defense strategy. Elizabeth compiled letters of recommendation from industry leaders. James prepared a timeline of Aurora's audited growth. 5 years strong. Every piece of paper on that table was a weapon, truth sharpened into evidence. When they finally stood to leave, James paused by the door, jacket over his shoulder. We're ready, he said. Whatever they throw, we're covered. Elizabeth smiled faintly. They won't know what hit them. I looked down at the city again, rain-washed, glowing, alive, and whispered to myself, they won't. He jested while coming ready myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of my family. I was ready for them. The next morning, I sat at my desk, staring at my phone as a voicemail played. This is Gregory Townsend, CEO of Horizon Resorts. We're calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning, 8 sharp. Some concerns have been raised about Aurora Events. We'll need to discuss. The line clicked dead. My heart stopped for a beat, then came the heat, the fury, the steadying breath. Elizabeth appeared at the doorway, reading my face instantly. Christine? They did it, I said flatly. They went straight to Horizon. She blinked once. Your family? Who else? This nut is ours. Rester in round. Rester and a fide. Moments later, James wheeled in from the adjoining office, holding a folder thick with reports. How bad? Emergency board meeting, I said. Tomorrow morning, full review. Elizabeth dropped into the chair across from me. They timed it perfectly. One day before the contract signing. I nodded, bile rising in my throat. They hadn't just sabotaged another dinner or whispered behind my back. They were coming for my company's survival and my credibility. My phone buzzed again. A text from one of our vendors. Hey Christine, your sister Melissa called asking about your payment history. Said she was working with your accountant. Sounded off, so I wanted to check. I turned the screen toward Elizabeth. Her face hardened. They're methodical, she said quietly. Then James's phone buzzed. He looked down, frowned. Harrow Linens, they said Victoria Foster called, claiming she was conducting a business ethics review for Horizon. Elizabeth swore under her breath. Unbelievable. No, I said. Predictable. Because my mother never did anything halfway. Within minutes, my desk phone lit up 3 voicemails, all from different Horizon board members. They'd coordinated it a full-scale, synchronized attack. I scrolled through the timestamps. Look at this, I said. All within 10 minutes of each other. They're blitzing the board. They're blitzing the board. Elizabeth's fingers flew across her tablet. Christine, your father called Horizon's CEO directly. Said he was concerned about the company's financial stability. Financial stability? James echoed, incredulous. Our books are flawless. I sank back in my chair, the anger cooling into something sharper. They're referencing the Westbrook contract, I said slowly. The one that canceled suddenly last month, no explanation, full deposit forfeited. James's eyes widened. Your father has connections there, doesn't he? And my mother plays bridge with Mrs. Westbrook every Tuesday. The realization hit us all at once. They'd orchestrated that cancellation just to create a red flag they could point to later. They sacrificed $50,000, Elizabeth whispered. Just to make you look unstable. That was my breaking point. This isn't petty anymore, I said, voice low and calm. This is war. Elizabeth began mobilizing instantly. She opened a secure folder and slid a thick stack of papers across my desk. 5 years of financial history. Profit margins, tax compliance, vendor payments, certified, and triplicate. James added another folder. Client satisfaction ratings, growth charts, and vendor testimonials. If Horizon wants transparency, we'll blind them with it. Elizabeth looked up from her screen. I've also contacted every department head. They're alerting key clients. Everyone's briefed. I nodded. Good. We move as one. The conference phone buzzed, and James hit speaker. Aurora Events. James Wilson speaking. A woman's voice came through calm, but wary. Christine, this is Sarah Martinez from Horizon's procurement board. I'm calling as a courtesy. We've received some troubling communications. The board's called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning at 8. Understood, I said evenly. We'll be there. Fully prepared. I'll be honest, Sarah added softly. Someone's pulling strings hard. This isn't standard procedure. After she hung up, the room fell silent again. Elizabeth rubbed her temple. They're trying to bury us under suspicion. Then we'll bury them under proof, I said. I turned to James. We're staying here tonight. No one's leaving until everything's airtight. He nodded. I'll recheck the audits. Elizabeth smiled faintly, eyes tired but determined. Then let's make sure tomorrow is the day the truth speaks louder than gossip. Hours blurred. The city outside went from dusk to midnight to dawn. The office hummed with the low whir of printers, the rustle of pages, the click of keyboards. Somewhere between the 3rd pot of coffee and the 10th cross-check of numbers, I realized something. I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry, focused, alive. Tomorrow, I said, staring out at the skyline. They'll try to tear us apart. James looked up. Then we remind them, I said, my voice steady, that Aurora Events wasn't built on their approval and it won't end because of their lies. By sunrise, the conference room was littered with empty coffee cups and marked up drafts. We'd barely slept, but none of us cared. Every page we printed was another layer of armor, another line of defense. James checked the clock. It's 6:30. 2 hours. There were hide of things of that later. But one competed to Kunst in the Wanjur. Elizabeth looked up from her laptop, eyes red but steady. I've got the full presentation deck done, financials, client testimonials, the health inspection records, everything. It's bulletproof. I nodded, pacing in front of the window. The skyline of Manhattan was washed in soft gold light, the city waking up unaware of the war about to unfold in a glass tower uptown. They think they can humiliate me again, I murmured. Turn me into that daughter in the kitchen. Elizabeth closed her laptop. They're not ready for who you've become. She was right. I wasn't Christine the help anymore. I was Christine Hale, CEO of Aurora Events, and I was walking into that boardroom like I owned the place. By 8 sharp, I arrived at Horizon Resorts headquarters, a 40-story mirror of glass and steel that looked like it had never known failure. Elizabeth walked beside me, calm and composed. James followed with 2 briefcases full of documents that probably weighed more than he did. The receptionist looked up. Boardroom, 15th floor. They're waiting. We stepped into the elevator. The mirrored walls reflected our faces, 3 people running on caffeine and purpose. When the doors opened, the air was colder, quieter. 20 executives sat around a massive mahogany table. A projection screen glowed at the front of the room, and there they were, my family. My mother, pristine in burgundy silk, spine perfectly straight. My father, staring down at his folded hands, and Melissa poised, polished, pretending this was a professional engagement, not an ambush. Standing beside the projector was Victoria Foster, the PR executive who'd once tried to ruin my company over a rejected job application. She looked up as we entered. Miss Hale. Thank you for joining us. Of course, I said evenly, setting my leather portfolio on the table. Gregory Townsend, Horizon's CEO, gestured to a chair. Please. We have some concerns we need to address before proceeding. Elizabeth sat beside me, tablet ready. James took the seat to my right, opening his files with the precision of a man loading ammunition. Victoria clicked her tablet, and the screen behind her lit up with graphs and charts. After conducting a review, she began, voice smooth and confident. We've identified concerning patterns regarding Aurora Events stability and management. The next slide showed a graph doctored, I realized instantly, suggesting a drop in client retention. As you can see, she continued, Aurora's client base has fluctuated significantly over the past 3 years. Furthermore, we've received reports of inconsistent management practices. She said it like she was reading from a press release. Then came the real dagger, my mother's voice. We felt it was our duty, she said sweetly, to bring these concerns forward. We only want what's best for everyone involved. I could feel every eye in the room shift toward me, waiting for a reaction, but I didn't flinch. Mr. Townsend, I said, my tone calm, steady. Before we continue, may I address these claims? He nodded. Go ahead. I opened my portfolio and slid a flash drive across the table toward Horizon's technical director. This contains Aurora's complete, independently audited financial records for the past 5 years, certified by 2 accounting firms. James stood, distributing folders. You'll find our client retention rate averages 87%, well above the industry average of 62%. Our audits show 0 discrepancies, 0 late payments, and 0 unresolved complaints. Townsend flipped through the pages, his brows knitting. I didn't stop. What you're witnessing today, I continued, isn't a legitimate business review. It's personal sabotage, carefully disguised as concern. Elizabeth stepped forward, her tablet glowing as she tapped the screen. Permission to present evidence, she said. Townsend gestured for her to proceed. A new timeline appeared on the big screen, color-coded, meticulous. Every major contract Aurora has negotiated, Elizabeth explained, has been preceded by anonymous complaints, health inspections, or vendor interference, all traceable to the same source, the Hale family. A murmur rippled through the room. Melissa's face went pale. My mother's hand twitched on her purse. We have transcripts, Elizabeth continued, of calls to vendors made by Melissa Hale, posing as an Aurora employee. We also have inspection reports citing anonymous tips from concerned family members. What a grace, James added. And a statistical analysis confirming the correlation between these disruptions and family social events, dinners, holidays, country club gatherings. Townsend looked up slowly. Is that true? Melissa swallowed. That's absurd. Absurd? I repeated softly. Then perhaps you can explain this. Elizabeth tapped another slide. An email appeared, blown up on the screen, from Melissa Hale to Victoria Foster. Subject: regarding Horizon contract. Gasps broke out around the table. Horizon's chief legal officer leaned forward. Miss Foster, he said sharply. Were you aware of this prior communication? Victoria hesitated just for a moment, but it was enough. I was approached as a consultant to review potential concerns. Concerns, I cut in. Manufactured by my family to discredit my company. I turned toward the board, every word measured. Aurora Events has never failed a contract. Never defaulted on a payment. Never missed a deadline. The only instability we've faced has been from people who should have supported us. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the projector. My mother spoke next, her voice tight but polished. We were only trying to protect Christine. She's always been impulsive. James rose, holding up a phone record. Then perhaps you can explain these calls traced directly to your home to 3 of our vendors, warning them Aurora was in financial trouble. My father finally looked up, his voice hoarse. Your business wasn't built on solid foundations, Christine. We were trying to protect you from failure. I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. By destroying everything I built? Townsend leaned back, eyes scanning the evidence laid before him. It appears, he said slowly, that this situation is personal, and that these concerns are not grounded in fact. Melissa stood abruptly, her voice trembling with outrage. This is an ambush. We came here out of genuine concern. They were bent to a mic. No, Townsend interrupted, his tone turning cold. You came here to interfere with Horizon's business relationships. That ends now. He turned to Victoria. Miss Foster, your presentation has misrepresented material facts. You may want to consult legal counsel. Victoria's composure crumbled. She gathered her papers quickly and hurried out without another word. My mother stood, trembling slightly but still trying to salvage control. We only wanted to protect the family's reputation. The family reputation, I repeated quietly. For 15 years, I've built a business based on integrity, transparency, and excellence values that should have enhanced that reputation. The only damage done today came from your choices. Townsend stood, effectively ending the confrontation. Miss Hale, Christine, our board will deliberate briefly. We've seen everything we need to see. He nodded toward the door. Please wait outside. As we left the room, I felt every muscle in my body trembling, not with fear this time, but with something deeper, relief, vindication, and a quiet, righteous fury that finally had proof on its side. In the waiting area, Elizabeth sank into a chair, exhaling shakily. No matter what happens, you've already won, she said. James nodded, his voice low but proud. The numbers don't lie. You did everything right. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. 30 minutes later, Townsend opened the door. Miss Hale, he said. Would you step back in? My family was gone. Townsend smiled faintly. After reviewing the evidence, Horizon Resorts has decided to award the contract to Aurora Events. The breath left my body. Furthermore, he continued, we'd like to expand our partnership. We want Aurora as our exclusive event partner across all Horizon properties worldwide. For a second, I couldn't speak. 15 years of work, of struggle, of humiliation, all leading to this moment. Townsend extended his hand. We value integrity, Christine. The way you handled yourself today is exactly why we want you. Elizabeth smiled through tears. James nodded, pride radiating off him. I shook Townsend's hand, my voice steady at last. Thank you. We won't disappoint you. When we stepped out into the crisp Manhattan air, I felt lighter than I'd ever felt in my life. The contract was worth nearly $4 million, but the real victory? Finally breaking free of the people who'd tried to convince me I was nothing more than the help. The door closed behind us, and for a long moment, I just stood there in the marble hallway, my hand still tingling from that handshake. $4 million, but more than that, respect. Elizabeth looked at me, her voice trembling with relief. You did it. James smiled, exhausted but beaming. No, he said. We did it. Outside, the city was loud traffic, horns, rain slicking the streets, but everything around me felt muted, like the universe had gone quiet, just for a second, to let me breathe. 15 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and doubted. And here I was, the CEO who just closed one of the biggest deals in the industry. By the time we got back to the office, the Aurora team was waiting. Elizabeth had texted them from the car, and somehow, the word had spread. When the elevator doors opened, applause broke out. Balloons, where did they even get balloons this fast? Floated by the reception desk. Someone had popped champagne. $4 million, boss, one of the coordinators shouted, grinning ear to ear. I laughed, the first real laugh in weeks, as Elizabeth handed me a glass of champagne. To Aurora, she said. To the team, I replied. And when the bubbles touched my lips, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at them. Not even at my family. Because for the first time, I finally understood the difference between proving yourself and being seen. A week later, Aurora's name was everywhere. Business journals, luxury blogs, even Forbes mentioned the Horizon deal as a case study in integrity under pressure. They called it the Hale strategy, a term I hadn't coined but one that stuck. Our phones didn't stop ringing. New clients, partnership requests, invitations to panels and conferences. And through it all, Elizabeth and James stood beside me like anchors. Calm, capable, loyal. One evening, as we wrapped up a meeting, James said something that stuck with me. You know, Christine, success changes people. But it also reveals who they were all along. You think I've changed? I asked. He smiled. I think you finally stopped asking for permission to be great. 3 months later, Aurora Events had tripled its staff. We'd opened a second office in Chicago, and another one was in the works for Miami. One afternoon, Elizabeth walked into my office holding a sealed envelope. You've been invited, she said, to the Waldorf Gala. They're honoring women in business leadership this year. I blinked. You're kidding. Nope. You're on the shortlist for the Excellence in Entrepreneurship Award. I stared at the letter-heavy cream cardstock, gold lettering, Waldorf Astoria. The same ballroom I used to only dream of booking events in. Now, they were inviting me as a guest of honor. Looks like you'll be trading that kitchen apron for a stage microphone, Elizabeth teased. About time, I said with a grin. The night of the gala, I stood behind the curtain, looking out over the shimmering sea of people, hundreds of industry leaders, journalists, executives, and somewhere in the crowd, I saw them, my parents, and Melissa. Of course they came. The invitation had gone out publicly. They couldn't resist being seen at a high society event, especially one where their daughter was being celebrated. But this time, something had shifted. I didn't feel dread. Or anger. Just distance. The kind that comes from finally outgrowing the room that used to suffocate you. When they called my name, Christine Hale, founder and CEO of Aurora Events, I stepped into the light. Applause filled the ballroom. The spotlight was warm on my face. For a second, I flashed back to that Christmas Eve standing in my parents' kitchen, arranging rosemary sprigs, while my mother bragged about Melissa. That girl was gone. I took the Crystal Award from the presenter and stepped up to the microphone. Success, I began, requires both talent and boundaries. A ripple of laughter and murmurs of agreement ran through the audience. 15 years ago, I thought talent alone was enough. I thought if I just worked hard, if I was kind, if I delivered perfection, people would see my worth. But sometimes, I paused, looking directly at the front row. You have to stop waiting to be invited to the table and start building your own. Thank you for watching, and this welcome in for Menges. One of the bought a fear, and one of pair. Applause broke out again, louder this time. The Aurora Foundation, I continued, was created to support women entrepreneurs whose families didn't see their vision. Because your dream doesn't need approval, it needs action. When I stepped off the stage, Elizabeth was there with a glass of champagne. To boundaries, she said, clinking glasses. And to the family we choose, I replied. 6 months later, the headlines hadn't stopped. Aurora Events expands to Miami and Denver. Christine Hale's Aurora Foundation funds 20 new women-led startups. We were building something far bigger than I'd ever imagined. One morning, James came into my office, a grin tugging at his mouth. The board approved your new proposal. Which one? Profit-sharing plan. Effective immediately. I looked up from my desk, caught off guard. You're kidding. Nope, he said. Permanent CFO, profit share included. I smiled. You believed in me when my own family didn't. I told him. You deserve to share what we've built. He looked down, clearly moved. Christine, don't thank me, I said. Just keep doing what you do best, keeping this company honest. He chuckled. Deal. This was day. That winter, as we prepared for Aurora's annual holiday gala, I found myself thinking back to that kitchen again. The smell of turkey, the heavy silver platter, the laughter I wasn't included in. And now here I was hosting our holiday celebration in a Manhattan ballroom, surrounded by 60 employees and friends. The chefs were professionals this time. The champagne was chilled, and I wasn't serving, I was toasting. To all of you, I said, raising my glass. For building something that matters. For proving that success doesn't come from approval. It comes from courage. The room erupted with cheers. As I glanced across the room, I saw Elizabeth laughing with the new interns, James chatting with clients, our team dancing under the lights, and for the first time, I realized I was finally home. But life has a funny way of circling back, because a few weeks later, I received an embossed envelope in the mail, one I never expected. It was an invitation to my parents' annual Christmas dinner. The irony didn't escape me. After everything, they still wanted me there. Elizabeth saw the envelope on my desk. Are you going? She asked. I sighed. I don't know. I haven't decided. You don't owe them anything, she said gently. Maybe not, I replied. But maybe I owe it to myself to walk in as the woman they tried to erase. The invitation sat on my desk for days. Heavy cream paper. Gold embossed letters. The same kind my mother used for every event she hosted at the country club. And yet this one felt different. It wasn't guilt that made me stare at it. It wasn't longing either. It was closure, the kind that comes when you finally realize you don't need revenge to win. Elizabeth leaned against the doorframe one evening, watching me turn the envelope over in my hands. You're going to go, she said quietly. I didn't answer right away. You think I should? No, she said. But I think you already decided to. She knew me too well. On Christmas Eve, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the clasp on my dress, a deep emerald gown. Simple but striking. It wasn't about showing off wealth. It was about presence. I wanted to walk into that house and remind them of one thing: I didn't need to shout to be powerful. When I arrived, the Henderson estate looked exactly the same as always: manicured hedges, golden lights, snow dusting the path. But this time, I wasn't entering as the daughter who carried serving trays. I was entering as the woman who'd built an empire. The butler opened the door. "Miss Hale," he greeted with surprise. "Evening, Thomas," I said with a smile. "Merry Christmas." Inside, laughter floated from the dining room, familiar, rehearsed. The sound of people pretending everything was fine. I followed the noise, heels clicking against polished marble. And when I stepped through the doorway, silence. My mother's glass froze midair. My father looked up, startled. Melissa's fork clattered against her plate. "Christine," my mother said finally, her voice cool but brittle. "We didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," I said softly. "But I thought it might be nice to see the family. And the people who used to underestimate me." "Ha!" Her eyes flickered. The guests shifted awkwardly. The dinner resumed, but the energy had changed. I could feel eyes on me, curious, measuring. I didn't mind. Let them look. I wasn't there for their approval. Between courses, Senator Williams's wife leaned over. "I read about your Horizon deal," she said warmly. $4 million, wasn't it? 4.2. I corrected gently. Gasps. A few murmurs. My mother's smile tightened. "You know," Mrs. Williams continued, "I told Evelyn how proud she must be." My mother took a slow sip of wine. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Christine's always been determined." I smiled. "Determined is one word for it." Melissa didn't look up. Her knife scraped too hard against her plate. My father cleared his throat. "So, how is business?" "Thriving," I said simply. "We're opening our 5th branch next quarter." The table fell quiet again. "5th?" someone repeated. "Yes. Miami, Chicago, Denver, San Francisco, and next Paris." That got their attention. "You're expanding internationally?" my mother asked, disbelief edging her voice. "We are," I said. "Horizon signed a global extension," they insisted. Elizabeth would have laughed at the look on her face, the mix of pride, fear, and denial, all at once. Dinner dragged on. The small talk turned to country club gossip and investment portfolios. I smiled politely, answering when spoken to, my mind drifting to the life I'd built beyond these walls. Finally, dessert was served: lemon tarts and brandy pudding, exactly the same as every year. And that's when my mother struck. "You know, dear," she said sweetly, "family is everything. No matter how successful we become, it's important to remember where we came from." There it was, the subtle jab, wrapped in civility. I set my fork down and met her eyes. "You're right," I said. "Family is everything. Especially the ones who help you grow even when it means standing against you." The room went still. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. "It means," I said gently, "I wouldn't be where I am if you hadn't tried to stop me." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Every rumor, every phone call, every concerned message to my clients. You taught me something important: how to fight for my own worth." A few guests exchanged nervous glances. Melissa stared down at her plate. "Christine," my father began. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I said, my voice calm, steady. "Because every year, I sat at this table and listened to stories about Melissa's achievements. I smiled. I served. I stayed quiet. But tonight, I'm done being quiet." My mother's eyes flashed. "You're humiliating yourself." "No," I said, leaning forward. "I'm reclaiming myself." You could hear the clock ticking in the silence that followed. "You wanted me small," I said, "so you could keep control. But I stopped asking for permission to exist the moment I realized I didn't need your validation to succeed." A tear slipped down Melissa's cheek. My father looked away. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in my life, she had no words. I stood, setting my napkin on the table. "Dinner was lovely," I said politely. "But I have another family waiting, one that celebrates who I am, not who they wish I'd been." End quote. Into erective ace to my 9. End quote. Into erective ace to med. And with that, I walked away. The murmurs behind me faded as I stepped into the cold night air. Snowflakes drifted down, soft and slow, melting against my hair. For the first time, I didn't feel bitterness, only peace. Because closure doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with walking away without needing one. When I got home, the Aurora team was still at the office, wrapping up last-minute projects before the holidays. The sight of them laughing, working, sharing pizza boxes, filled me with warmth that no bloodline ever could. Elizabeth looked up as I walked in, her eyes lighting up. "You went," she said. "I went," I said. "And?" I smiled. "I finally said everything I needed to." She tilted her head. "And how do you feel?" "Free," I said simply. 2 weeks later, an email arrived. From Evelyn Hale. Subject: dinner. I hovered over the preview, my chest tightening, not with fear this time, but curiosity. "Christine, your speech at the gala was impressive." Perhaps I underestimated you. I would like to talk as family. No expectations, no arguments. Love, Mom. I didn't respond right away. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and smiled, because some wounds don't heal through words. They heal through peace and distance. 2 months later, Aurora Events hosted the National Women in Business Summit, in partnership with Horizon Resorts. Hundreds of female founders, CEOs, and creators filled the ballroom. The energy was electric: laughter, connection, empowerment. When I took the stage, I looked out at the sea of faces and felt that same quiet certainty rise in my chest. A few years ago, I began. Someone told me I was good at following instructions. They didn't mean it as a compliment. But I took it as one because following instructions taught me structure. And structure taught me how to break rules strategically. The crowd laughed. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. The people who underestimate you are often the ones who secretly fear you'll prove them wrong. So prove them wrong with grace, with fire, and with receipts. The room erupted into applause, and as the lights dimmed, I felt it, that same stillness, as the night I signed the Horizon deal. Except now, it wasn't relief. It was purpose. Later that night, I stood by the window of my office, watching the city glitter below. Elizabeth joined me, holding 2 cups of coffee. You know, she said, handing me one. This all started because your mother called a health inspector. I laughed softly. Yeah. Guess I should thank her. Elizabeth raised her cup. To chaos, the best motivator. And to peace, I added, the best revenge. We clinked cups. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft, quiet, infinite. And this time, I wasn't looking back. Spring came early that year. New York thawed out fast, and with it came a flood of new opportunities. Aurora Events had just secured a partnership with the Fairmont Group, and our expansion into Europe was officially underway. We were planning luxury conferences across Paris, Milan, and Zurich, all under the banner of the Aurora Experience. But while business soared, something unexpected began happening in my personal life. It started with an email from Melissa Hale. Subject: Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Christine, I know I have no right to ask this, but I need your help. Mom's health is getting worse. She won't tell you, but I think you deserve to know. Please call me. M. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For years, I'd imagined this moment, my family needing me, realizing I wasn't the weak link they'd painted me to be. And yet, when it finally came, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. That night, I sat in my penthouse apartment, staring out at the skyline. It was beautiful, all glass and light and movement, but in the quiet, I could still hear the echo of my mother's voice from that Christmas dinner. Family is everything. I poured a glass of wine and let myself sit with the thought. Maybe she had meant it in her own warped way. Maybe control was her version of love. Still, I couldn't pretend the scars weren't real. I texted Elizabeth. Christine. Melissa emailed. Elizabeth. And? Christine. Says Mom's sick. Elizabeth. You going to see her? Christine. I don't know. Elizabeth. Then decide from peace, not guilt. She was right. So, I decided to go, not out of obligation, but clarity. The next morning, I took a train to Connecticut. No chauffeur, no headlines, no announcement. Just me and silence. The Henderson estate looked smaller now. The grandeur that once intimidated me felt hollow, like a museum of old performances. Melissa answered the door. She looked older, paler, the usual PR gloss stripped away. Christine, she said softly. Melissa. We stood there for a beat, 2 women who had spent years circling each other, both too proud to admit we were mirrors. Finally, she stepped aside. She's in the sunroom. My mother sat by the window, wrapped in a shawl, a book resting open in her lap. Her hair was thinner, her eyes softer, and when she saw me, she didn't smile right away. You came, she said quietly. I did. I wasn't sure you would. I stepped closer. Melissa said, you're not well. She sighed, closing her book. It's nothing tragic, just time reminding me that it exists. Even now, she was elegant in her denial. You look successful, she said finally, her gaze scanning the emerald ring on my finger. I saw your interview in Forbes. I'm doing well, I said simply. She nodded slowly. I always knew you would. The laugh escaped before I could stop it, quiet but bitter. No, I said. You didn't. Her eyes glistened. Maybe I didn't understand how you defined success. I folded my arms. Success, to me, is freedom. And to me, she said softly, it was security. I wanted you safe. By controlling me? By keeping you from disappointment. I met her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see the cold matriarch. I saw a woman who was terrified. Terrified that love meant losing control. Terrified that her daughters would leave and never look back. Maybe that fear had built the walls between us. We sat in silence for a long time. The air smelled like lavender and nostalgia. "Christine," she said finally. "I heard what you said at the gala." I tilted my head. "You watched?" "Of course. You're my daughter." I said nothing. "You were right," she continued, her voice shaking. "I wanted you small because I didn't know how to love you when you didn't need me. And I'm sorry." It wasn't a dramatic apology, just a quiet confession that broke something open in both of us. I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said. "That's all I ever needed to hear." As I left the sunroom, I found Melissa waiting in the hallway. "How'd it go?" she asked, tentative. "Better than expected." She looked down, twisting her bracelet nervously. "I was awful to you. I know that. I didn't think you'd ever forgive me." He had there say been another Danning with his note. I studied her, the sister who'd once tried to destroy my career out of jealousy, now standing small in her own guilt. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," I said. "It's letting go of the hope that the past could have been different." She nodded slowly. "You sound like Dad." That caught me off guard. "Dad? He talks about you. More than you think." I frowned. I didn't expect that. He regrets how he handled things. He just doesn't know how to say it. For the first time in years, something in my chest loosened. "Maybe that's enough for now," I said. When I got back to the train station, I texted Elizabeth. "Christine." Saw them both. Elizabeth. And? The weight of them were conductions. Christine. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. Elizabeth. That's what healing feels like. The months that followed were quieter. Aurora kept growing, yes, but inside, I was shifting. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I was building legacy. The Aurora Foundation began funding mentorship programs for young women starting businesses from scratch. Many of them reminded me of myself, tired, hungry, underestimated. One girl, Nadia, came up to me after a workshop, eyes shining. "You're the reason I didn't give up," she said. I smiled, feeling something warm unfurl in my chest. "No," I said. "You're the reason I didn't give up. This fine. But what you staffen in tind exempelen in money." Because every story I helped build reminded me why I'd fought so hard, not just to survive, but to matter. A year later, I got another letter handwritten, this time, shaky script, from Mom. "Christine, the doctor says I don't have much time left. Don't feel obligated to visit. Just know I'm proud of you. Truly proud. You became the kind of woman I never knew how to be. Love, Mom." Tears blurred the ink, and though I didn't go back to Connecticut this time, I whispered into the quiet, "I forgive you. Because sometimes, that's the only goodbye we need." At her memorial, Melissa gave a speech. I stood at the back, unseen, listening. "My mother taught us many things," she said, her voice trembling. "But my sister taught me the most important one, that success means nothing without integrity." Our eyes met across the crowd. No bitterness. No resentment. Just peace. I slipped out quietly before anyone noticed. Stepping into the sunlight with the weight of a lifetime finally lifted. That evening, Elizabeth found me in my office, staring out at the skyline again. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded. For the first time in a long time, "Yeah." She set a folder on my desk. New project proposals. More expansions, more growth. But I closed it gently. "Let's take a week off," I said. "Somewhere quiet. No contracts. No deadlines. Just breathing." Elizabeth smiled. "You mean like normal people?" "Exactly." We both laughed. Outside, the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the city gold. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't chasing light anymore. I was standing in it. It's strange how quiet life feels after you stop fighting for approval. Not empty, quiet, just peaceful. Like your soul finally exhales after years of holding its breath. 6 months after my mother's memorial, Aurora was thriving more than ever. Our offices stretched across 3 continents now. We had a global team of 200 people. And the foundation had funded over 40 startups led by women who'd once been told they weren't enough. But even in success, I'd learned to keep my feet on the ground. That's why, on a rainy Monday morning in Paris, you could still find me standing beside a folding table, personally checking the placement of name cards before a client gala. Elizabeth laughed from across the room. "Christine, you own half this skyline. You can let the interns handle the name tags." I smiled without looking up. "Attention to detail is the reason I own half this skyline." She rolled her eyes, grinning. "Touché." We both laughed. After the event, we went for coffee near the Seine. The cafe smelled of espresso and fresh rain. The kind of moment that feels cinematic even when no one's watching. Elizabeth sipped her latte and studied me over the rim of her cup. "You've changed," she said. "In a good way, I hope." "In a real way," she said. You don't walk into rooms trying to prove anything anymore. You just arrive. I leaned back, letting the words sink in. She was right. I used to enter every meeting with armor, perfect posture, perfect words, perfect smile. Now, I entered with peace. You ever think, I said quietly, that we spend the first half of our lives trying to earn love, and the second half trying to unlearn that need? Elizabeth smiled sadly. You figured that out sooner than most. A few days later, Melissa called. Her voice was softer now, almost fragile. I didn't expect you to answer. You caught me on a good day, I said lightly. She laughed, awkward but genuine. I just wanted to tell you. I've been offered a partnership with a non-profit PR agency. We're focusing on education reform. That's great, Mel. I wouldn't have gone for it if it wasn't for you, she admitted. Seeing what you built made me realize I could start over too. For the first time, I didn't hear competition in her voice, just honesty. You can always start over, I said softly. That's the secret no one tells you. That summer, Aurora hosted its biggest event yet. The Global Empowerment Gala, a joint effort between our company and the Horizon Foundation. It was held in Florence, inside a restored palazzo overlooking the Arno River. Candles flickered along marble terraces, violins played softly under the arches, and the air smelled like jasmine and rain. Halfway through the evening, Gregory Townsend, the CEO of Horizon, now a close friend and mentor, raised his glass. When I met Christine Hale, he said, she was walking into a boardroom full of people waiting to watch her fall. Instead, she taught us what leadership really looks like, not perfection, but perseverance. Applause filled the hall. I smiled, humbled, but also deeply aware of how far I'd come from that kitchen in Connecticut. After the gala, I found myself outside, overlooking the river. The water shimmered under the moonlight, soft music echoing from inside. Footsteps approached behind me. It was Gregory. You've built something extraordinary, he said quietly. I had help, I replied. We all have help, but not everyone has vision or grace under fire. He paused, looking at me. Do you ever think about what's next? I laughed softly. Always. It's both my gift and my curse. He smiled. You know, Christine, most people chase success to fill a void. But you built something that gives instead. That's rare. I turned to him. You mean, Aurora? No, he said. You. And for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Weeks later, back in New York, I was sitting in my office late one night, reviewing expansion plans for Southeast Asia. The skyline glowed like a living constellation outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. James knocked on the door. You're still here? You're one to talk, I teased. He smiled, setting a folder on my desk. You've officially been nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year. I froze. What? National Business Association. The same award your father was nominated for in 1998. I exhaled slowly. That's poetic. More like full circle, James said. I nodded, trying not to get emotional. He never won, I murmured. Then it's time someone in the family did. We both laughed. The night of the award ceremony arrived in a blur of flashbulbs and velvet gowns. Elizabeth insisted on styling me herself. You're not just a CEO tonight, she said. You're the story. And maybe she was right. When they called my name, Christine Hale, founder and CEO of Aurora Events, the crowd rose in applause. I walked to the stage, heart pounding, lights blinding. But this time, I didn't feel small under them. I felt grounded. When I was younger, I began. I thought success was about being recognized. Now, I know it's about recognizing yourself. The audience was silent, the kind of silence that means people are truly listening. I used to work in the kitchen at my parents' house during holiday parties, serving food to the same people I do business with now. And I used to believe that being humble meant staying invisible. It doesn't. I took a breath, voice steady. Humility isn't shrinking to make others comfortable. It's standing tall and knowing you don't have to prove your worth to anyone, not even family. Applause erupted, long and loud. And for once, I let myself feel it. The pride. The power. The peace. After the ceremony, as cameras flashed and reporters asked questions, I caught sight of someone standing near the back of the ballroom. Melissa. She wasn't trying to get attention. She was just there, watching. When our eyes met, she mouthed a simple word. Proud. And that was enough. Later that night, Elizabeth and I shared a quiet toast back at my apartment. The award gleamed on the coffee table between us. So, she said, smiling. What now? I looked out at the skyline, the city that had witnessed every version of me. Now, I said softly, I stop running from where I came from and start building for the next generation who won't have to. 2 weeks later, Aurora announced its most ambitious initiative yet. The Horizon Fellowship, a global mentorship program for young women in developing countries. Fully funded by Aurora's profits, it provided education, startup funding, and one-on-one coaching. Within a month, applications poured in from over 20 nations. One letter stood out. Dear Ms. Hale, my name is Lila. I live in Nairobi. My parents don't believe girls should run businesses, but I watch your videos every week, and now I'm saving to start my own event company. Thank you for showing me what's possible. I sat at my desk, tears blurring the words. Somewhere in that letter, I saw my younger self tired, unseen, but full of fire. And for the first time, I realized, this was it. This was the legacy. That night, I walked out onto the balcony. The city hummed below, endless and alive. I whispered into the wind, for every girl who's ever been told she's not enough, this is for you. A year passed after the Horizon Fellowship launched, and Aurora Events had evolved into something far bigger than I'd ever dreamed. What began as one woman's fight for dignity had turned into a global movement. Every month, new fellows arrived from around the world, young women from villages, towns and cities, who carried notebooks full of ideas and hearts full of courage. They called me Miss Christine, but I always corrected them. Just Christine, I'd say with a smile. Titles don't build dreams, work does. And they'd laugh, the kind of laugh that feels like sunlight. But what I loved most wasn't their admiration. It was watching them grow into power, unapologetic, unstoppable, unafraid. On the one-year anniversary of the fellowship, Horizon hosted a celebration in New York. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom, alumni, investors, journalists, and the fellows themselves, standing proud in the front rows. Gregory Townsend, the man who'd once seen through the lies and believed in me, stood at the podium. 1 year ago, he said, Aurora Events proved that integrity outlasts deceit. But what Christine has built since then, this fellowship proves something even greater. That kindness scales. The room erupted in applause, and when he called my name, I walked to the stage, feeling every step like a chapter of a story finally finding its ending. When I started Aurora, I thought I was building an event company. But I was wrong. I looked out over the crowd faces from every corner of the world. What I really built was a reminder that power doesn't come from privilege. It comes from perseverance. The rest goes to amends. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. I used to believe that family was something you were born into, I continued. But life taught me that sometimes, family is something you build with trust, loyalty, and shared purpose. Elizabeth smiled from the front row. James nodded, emotion in his eyes. And as for those who doubted us, we thank them too. Because without resistance, there's no strength. Without silence, there's no voice. Without doubt, there's no faith. Applause swelled again, echoing through the hall like thunder. I smiled. Here's to every woman who's ever been underestimated. May your success be the speech they never expected. The crowd rose to their feet. After the ceremony, I stepped out onto the terrace. The night air was cool, carrying the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses. The skyline glittered, alive and golden. And then, a voice behind me. You still hate parties, Melissa said, smiling softly. I turned. And you still show up to them fashionably late. She laughed, the easy kind. The one we'd both forgotten how to share. I wanted to tell you something, she said. I met one of your fellows last week, Lila, from Kenya. She's incredible. She said she wants to build her own version of Aurora back home. I felt a lump rise in my throat. She will, I said. She already has the spark. He's bout me bonds for an 6. You really did it, Christine, Melissa said quietly. You turned everything they said you couldn't do into a blueprint for the next generation. We all did, I said. We just stopped letting their doubts define us. She hesitated. Mom would have been proud. I nodded, looking up at the stars. I think she finally was. Later that night, I returned to my office. The building was quiet, city lights painting gold streaks across the glass walls. On my desk sat a box I hadn't noticed before, tied with a silver ribbon. A note rested on top, written in Melissa's handwriting. You were right. Family isn't who you're born with. It's who shows up when the world doesn't believe in you. Thank you for teaching me that. Love, M. Inside the box was a framed photo. It was from years ago, before the fights, before the walls. The two of us as children, baking cookies in the old kitchen. Flour everywhere, our laughter frozen in time. I smiled, tracing the edge of the frame. Weeks later, Elizabeth and I flew to Kenya to visit the first group of Horizon Fellows. The girls met us at the airport, waving handmade banners that said, "Welcome home, Miss Christine." We spent the day touring their new event studio, a bright, bustling space full of color and ambition. Lila ran up to me, beaming. "Miss Christine, look," she said, holding up her first official contract. "We booked our first client a wedding next month." "That's incredible," I said, hugging her. "How do you feel?" She grinned. "Like I finally matter." Tears pricked my eyes, because that's exactly how I'd felt all those years ago, the first time someone saw me not as help, but as capable. That night, as we sat under the Nairobi sky, Elizabeth asked quietly, You ever think about what's next? I smiled. Always. And maybe it's time to step back a little, I said. Let others lead. Let the next Christine find her own way. She raised an eyebrow. Retirement? Not exactly, I said. Evolution. We both laughed softly, the stars above us glowing brighter than any ballroom chandelier. When we returned to New York, I made it official. Aurora Events appointed a new COO, one of our earliest fellows. Elizabeth transitioned into CEO, and I, for the first time, allowed myself to rest. I spent my mornings writing, mentoring, and walking by the Hudson River. No meetings, no deadlines, just peace. One morning, I ran into Gregory Townsend. He smiled, eyes warm. You finally slowed down, he teased. Maybe I'm learning there's more to success than speed, I replied. You built something that outlived you, he said. That's what legacy really means. Years later, Aurora continued to grow not as my company anymore, but as a movement, a story passed down. And sometimes, when a young entrepreneur would mention my name, I'd smile quietly, unseen, and think that's enough, because I didn't need the applause anymore. The recognition, the validation. I'd already won the moment I stopped fighting to be seen by the wrong people and started building for the right one. One evening, as the sun set over the river, I found myself back in the kitchen, not the one from my parents' house, but my own. I was baking cookies for the neighborhood kids, flour on my hands, music playing low in the background, and as I pulled the tray from the oven, I smiled, because somehow, the girl who used to serve dinner to others, had finally learned to serve herself with grace, with pride, with peace. Final narration. Epilogue. They once treated me like a maid. But life has a way of rewriting stories when you refuse to stay small. I stopped chasing their approval and started honoring my truth. I stopped serving their expectations and started serving my purpose. And that made all the difference. The torch keeps passing. The light keeps moving. And maybe that's what love looks like when it grows up responsibility that never asks for credit. I closed the book, turned off the lights, and looked out at the city below. Somewhere out there, Sophie was probably still awake, testing new equations. Somewhere in Zurich, Victoria was teaching a student to listen to their conscience before their ambition. And somewhere beyond all of it, Grandma's words still echoed. Roots through stone, Lizzie. Always through stone. Passing the torch. The next morning, I made it official. At the board meeting, I announced my decision to step down as chairwoman. Gasps filled the room. You can't. One board member protested. The institute is you. I smiled. Exactly. And that's why it's time. Sophie sat 2 seats away, stunned. You built this, she whispered. And now you'll build what comes next, I said. When the vote passed, I stood up, feeling the kind of peace that comes when you finally finish the story you were meant to tell. As I walked out of that boardroom for the last time, the applause followed soft at first, then rising like the hum of the servers below. It wasn't for me anymore. It was for the idea that had survived me. The final conversation. That night, Reynolds found me sitting on the rooftop, watching the skyline. You really did it, he said quietly. We did it, I corrected. He handed me a mug of tea. You think they'll be okay without you? I smiled. They already are. He nodded, taking a sip. Then what's next? Rest, I said. And then maybe writing, teaching. I don't know. He chuckled. The woman who redefined energy doesn't know what's next. I love that. I leaned back, feeling the wind brush my face. Maybe that's what freedom feels like, not knowing, but not being afraid of it anymore. Their tankles go in self. We sat in silence for a while, watching the city breathe beneath us. The lights, the movement, the quiet hum, all of it built on the foundation of a single truth. You don't conquer the world by owning it. You change it by lighting it up and letting it go. The day I left the Morgan Institute, New York was quiet. No fanfare, no cameras. Just the early sun reflecting off the glass facade that once felt like a fortress. Inside, Sophie stood at the entrance, her hands clasped, eyes shining with that mix of pride and fear I remembered all too well. You're sure about this? She asked softly. I nodded. Absolutely. It's yours now. This not same for American. And my one. The automatic doors slid open behind me, the hum of the lobby fading into morning air. As I stepped outside, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was finally walking into the rest of my life. The world after. Weeks turned into months. And for the first time in over a decade, I learned what quiet felt like. No deadlines, no board meetings, no headlines with my name attached. I moved into a small cottage by the coast, far enough from the city that the stars were visible again. There was a garden. Salt on the wind. Birds that didn't care who you were. Most days, I woke with the sunrise and made tea instead of coffee. Some mornings, I wrote. Others, I just watched the waves. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for resting. Letters to the future. Every week, I received packages from the Institute, progress updates, press clippings, and letters from students. They called me Professor Morgan now. Even though I wasn't teaching officially. Sophie's updates were meticulous. New quantum grid extensions in South America. Partnerships with universities in Africa. Medical breakthroughs built from Aurora's architecture. Her last note ended simply. We did it. You were right, it keeps growing, even without you. I smiled reading that. That was the dream all along, to build something that didn't need me to survive. I opened my journal again, adding an entry beneath Grandma's last words. The moment you stop trying to control the legacy is when it truly begins to live. The knock on the door. One evening, I was sitting on the porch watching the tide roll in when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a young woman mid-20s, carrying a small recorder and a notepad. Dr. Morgan? She asked nervously. Yes, I said, smiling. Though I'm technically retired, she laughed awkwardly. I'm with the Global Chronicle. I'm writing a piece on the human stories behind the Aurora movement. I was hoping to talk to you. If you're willing. I hesitated, then gestured toward the porch. You've got good timing. Sunset interviews are my favorite. We sat as the sky melted into shades of orange and violet. So, she began. When people talk about you, they call you the woman who changed the world. How does that feel? I laughed softly. Heavy. And wrong. The world changed itself. I just refused to stop believing it could. She smiled. What made you believe? I looked toward the horizon, where the light met the sea. Because I'd already lived through darkness, I said. And once you've seen the dark, you can't help but fight for the light. The museum. A year later, I received an invitation. The Morgan Legacy exhibition, hosted at the National Science Museum. The email said, we'd like to honor your contribution to humanity. Attendance optional, but deeply hoped for. I almost didn't go, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, said yes. The museum was filled with displays from every stage of my life. The first prototype coil from the basement lab, photos of our team in those sleepless nights, the letter from the U.S. Department of Energy, and, at the center of it all, a holographic globe of the Aurora grid. Its lights pulsing softly across every continent. I stood there for a long time, watching it. Children pressed their faces to the glass, laughing as their countries glowed brighter. One little girl looked up at me and said, Are you the lady who made the light? I knelt beside her. No, I said gently. I just helped it find its way. The reunion. After the ceremony, Reynolds found me in the crowd. He looked older now, silver hair. Same irreverent grin. Still allergic to speeches, I see, he teased. Someone has to keep your expectations realistic, I said, hugging him. How's the coast treating you? Too peaceful, I replied. I miss chaos sometimes. He laughed. You could always come back. I shook my head. No. It's their turn now. He smiled knowingly. You sound like her. Grandma? He nodded. She'd be proud. You didn't just build a company, Elizabeth. You built a conscience. His words stayed with me long after he left. Because conscience, that was what all of this had been about from the beginning. Not wealth, not revenge, just the quiet insistence that doing good doesn't make you naive, it makes you necessary. Victoria's final goodbye. A few months later, I received another letter, no return address this time. Inside was a photo. Victoria, standing in front of a classroom, chalk on her hands, smiling. On the back, she'd written, I finally understand. It was never about being the smartest in the room, it was about making sure others could stand in it too. That was the last I ever heard from her, and that was enough. The conversation with Aisha. Years later, when I visited the Nairobi campus named after the institute, I was introduced to a young physicist. Her name tag read, Aisha N. Morgan Fellow. She smiled nervously. You probably don't remember me, but I wrote you a letter once when I was little. About a light switch. I froze. That was you? She nodded, laughing. I kept it. I'm a quantum systems engineer now. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All I could do was hug her. You're the proof, I whispered. The world really does listen when you speak softly enough for it to lean in. She smiled. Your light reached far, Dr. Morgan. No, I said, smiling through tears. Our light did. Full circle. That night, I sat on the balcony of my hotel, the city alive below. I took out Grandma's journal, now weathered, its pages soft from use, and wrote the final entry. Grandma, the roots you planted grew through stone and reached every corner of the world. You were right, legacy isn't inheritance, it's invitation. And now, I think, it's time to let the next hands carry the light. I closed the journal and watched as the city flickered, thousands of tiny lights dancing in rhythm. Each one, a continuation. Each one, a promise. Epilogue. The Quiet Revolution. Years later, Historians would call it the quantum renaissance. They'd talk about the science, the politics, the money, but that was never the real story. The real story was simpler. It was about a woman who refused to sell her soul for $3.5 million, and instead built something worth $4.2 billion, not in dollars, but in impact. It was about a family that fell apart so the world could come together. And it was about love, the kind that doesn't end, only changes form. Because the truth is, revolutions don't happen in crowds or speeches. They happen quietly in labs, in letters, in late-night decisions made by people who refuse to quit. And long after the names fade, the light stays.